In the writhing darkness of the Eye of Terror, where reality bends to the whims of gods who feast on emotion and the very stars bleed with the accumulated spite of 10,000 years, there exists a realm where the thunder of artillery never ceases, and the mathematics of destruction have been elevated to an art form that would make the ancient philosophers of terror weep with bitter recognition. This is Medringard, the fortress world of the Iron Warriors, where warsmith Thane Korvek stands upon battlements of living iron, calculating the precise trajectory needed to reduce yet another bastion of hope to rubble and despair. The air tastes of cordite and copper, of spilled blood, and the metallic tang of hatred, refined over millennia into something approaching purity. Korvek's augmented eyes track the movement of enemy forces across the battlefield below, each calculation flowing through cogitators that have been blessed by the dark mechanicum and cursed by bitter experience. He remembers when mathematics served creation, when the precision of his calculations raised monuments to human achievement rather than reducing them to mathematically perfect collapse. That was before Olympia. That was before the lesson that loyalty is a currency the Imperium spends without ever intending to repay. The siege engines of the 4th Legion grind forward through terrain that defies conventional physics, their iron tracks crushing the crystallized remains of hope itself. These are not the crude battering rams of barbarians or the spectacular weaponry of glory-seeking warriors. These are instruments of precise destruction, each one a testament to 10,000 years spent perfecting the art of bringing low what others have raised high. The sound they make is not the roar of beasts but the whisper of equations solving themselves, the soft click of calculations reaching their inevitable conclusion. Korvek recalls the first siege he witnessed as a new inductee to the Legion, fresh from the recruitment worlds of Olympia, with dreams of building something lasting in service to the Emperor's vision. He had watched in awe as the veterans of the 4th Legion reduced a rebel stronghold to mathematical principles, each wall falling according to precise calculations that accounted for stress points, material composition, and the psychological impact of systematic collapse. It had been beautiful in its efficiency, terrible in its completeness. He had not yet learned that beauty and terror were often the same thing, viewed from different angles of approach. The enemy bastion before him now represents everything he has learned about the nature of defiance and the mathematics of its defeat. Its walls rise in sweeping curves designed to deflect artillery, its towers positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire, its gates reinforced with adamantium and faith in equal measure. The architects who designed it understand the principles of fortification. They do not understand that Korvek helped write those principles, back when he still believed that building something was more satisfying than watching it fall. He adjusts the trajectory of the siege guns by precisely 3 degrees, accounting for the gravitational anomalies that plague this sector of the eye. The correction is so subtle that his subordinates do not notice it, yet it will mean the difference between a breach and a mere crater. This is the Iron Warrior's gift and curse, the ability to see exactly how everything must fall, to calculate with perfect precision the moment when hope transforms into despair and resistance collapses into mathematical certainty. The first shells arc across the battlefield with trajectories that satisfy equations written in blood and spite. They strike not the strongest points of the enemy fortification, but the joints between strength and weakness, the places where the architect's dreams meet the reality of physics and metallurgy. The explosions bloom like flowers, of flame and shrapnel, each one precisely calculated to create stress fractures that will propagate according to principles that Korvek's learned during his centuries of study on Mars, back when he thought knowledge was meant to create rather than destroy. As the walls begin their carefully orchestrated collapse, Korvek feels the familiar satisfaction that has sustained him through 10 millennia of systematic destruction. It is not the hot rush of bloodlust or the ecstatic transcendence sought by other servants of chaos. It is the cold pleasure of watching reality conform to his calculations, of seeing the universe acknowledge the superiority of his mathematical understanding over the naive optimism of those who still believe in permanent things. The defenders rally with desperate courage, pouring fire from positions that Korvek's analysis has already marked for elimination. They fight well, these Imperial soldiers, with the kind of determined professionalism that he once respected before he learned that respect is another currency that the Imperium never bothers to honor. Their tactics are sound, their positions well chosen, their equipment maintained with the kind of care that speaks to genuine pride in their craft. It will not matter. He has already calculated 17 different ways to break their resistance, and he will use whichever proves most efficient. The second wave of bombardment strikes the communication towers with surgical precision, severing the defenders' ability to coordinate their response. The third wave targets ammunition depots that Korvek's intelligence network identified 3 days ago, turning the defenders' own supplies into weapons against their positions. The fourth wave is aimed not at military targets, but at symbols of hope. 2PT. The chapel where soldiers pray for deliverance, the medical station where they tend their wounded, the banner poles where their colors fly with defiant pride. This is what the Iron Warriors have learned that other Chaos forces have not, that breaking the enemy's will requires more than simply killing their bodies. It requires demonstrating the futility of resistance through systematic destruction of everything they value, everything they believe in, everything that gives meaning to their struggle. It requires teaching them that their faith is mathematics, and their mathematics are wrong. Korvek remembers the siege of Castellax Prime, where he had faced Imperial fists, defending fortifications built according to principles that he himself had helped develop during the Great Crusade. The irony had been exquisite and terrible, watching his own doctrines turned against him, seeing his tactical innovations used to delay his advance. It had taken him 47 days to reduce those walls, 47 days of bitter calculation and systematic adaptation. When the final breach opened, he had felt not triumph, but a kind of crystalline clarity about the nature of his existence. He was a destroyer. He had always been a destroyer. The years spent building, the pride taken in construction and creation, had been merely preparation for his true calling. The universe was entropy and collapse, and the Iron Warriors were its most faithful servants. They were honest in a way that the other legions could never be. They did not pretend that destruction served some higher purpose or represented the will of gods who might reward faithful service. They destroyed because destruction was the only truth that remained constant across all the variables of existence. The enemy bastion shudders as another precise salvo strikes its foundation pylons. Korvek can see the exact moment when the defenders realize that their position is mathematically untenable, when courage transforms into the bitter recognition that they are fighting not an enemy, but a force of nature as inexorable as gravity or decay. Some of them break immediately, fleeing through evacuation tunnels that Korvek's forces identified and mined 3 hours ago. Others maintain their posts with the kind of stubborn dignity that he would have admired in another life, before he learned that dignity is just pride that hasn't yet acknowledged its own futility. The siege engines advance through streets that have been cleared by precisely calculated artillery strikes, their iron treads crushing debris that was once someone's home, someone's hope, someone's defiant gesture against the darkness. Korvek follows behind in his command Rhino, monitoring the tactical displays that show his forces flowing around defensive positions like water finding its way through stone. His subordinates report their progress with the clipped efficiency that the Iron Warriors have elevated to an art form. No wasted words, no emotional commentary, just the mathematical reduction of resistance to zero. He thinks of Perturabo, their gene father who taught them that perfection was achievable through the systematic elimination of flaws, that glory was a distraction from the more important work of getting the job done. The other Primarchs had sought to inspire their sons with visions of heroism and transcendence. Perturabo had taught them to find satisfaction in competence, to take pride in being the reliable tool that never failed to accomplish its purpose. It had seemed like wisdom at the time. Now, Korvek understands that it was preparation for this, anyone safe, for becoming instruments of destruction so perfectly calibrated that they could reduce any target to its component atoms without ever questioning whether they should. The final assault begins at precisely 1400 hours, Imperial Standard Time, launched simultaneously from 17 different vectors, according to a plan that accounts for everything from wind speed to the psychological profiles of enemy commanders. Korvek watches through augmented eyes as his forces flow through breaches that he has calculated to be exactly wide enough to allow rapid ingress without providing defensive advantages to the enemy. The resistance collapses with mathematical precision, each strong point falling in sequence according to principles that he learned during his first siege 10,000 years ago. When the last defender falls and the last gun falls silent, Korvek stands amid the ruins and feels the familiar emptiness that follows successful completion of any project. The bastion is gone, reduced to rubble and scattered atoms according to his calculations. The enemy is defeated, their resistance broken according to his tactical analysis. The objective is achieved, another victory added to the countless victories that mark the Iron Warriors' progress through a galaxy that seems designed to provide them with an endless supply of things to destroy. But victory is not satisfaction, and completion is not fulfillment. These are lessons that the Iron Warriors learned long ago. In the bitter years following their exile from the Imperium, they had served with such faithful dedication. Victory is simply the confirmation that their calculations were correct, that their understanding of physics and psychology and the fundamental nature of entropy remains superior to that of their enemies. It is a professional satisfaction, the pride of a craftsman whose work meets his own exacting standards. Korvek orders the demolition charges set according to specifications that will ensure complete structural collapse within acceptable parameters. The work proceeds with characteristic Iron Warriors efficiency, no unnecessary destruction, no wasteful expenditure of resources, no dramatic gestures for the sake of effect. When the charges detonate, the remaining walls fall inward, according to precisely calculated trajectories, creating a debris field that will require exactly 18 days to clear, using standard Imperial construction equipment. As his forces withdraw from the conquered territory, Korvek reviews the tactical data that will be incorporated into future siege protocols. The enemy used a new type of reinforcement beam in their eastern wall, inferior to standard patterns, but potentially problematic if deployed in sufficient quantity. Their communication systems showed a 3-second lag between primary and backup channels, not significant in normal operations, but exploitable under specific jamming conditions. Their morale broke 12% faster than Imperial Guard baseline when systematic destruction targeted symbols rather than purely military assets. These observations will be compiled into reports that will be disseminated throughout the Legion, analyzed by other warsmiths, and incorporated into the vast database of knowledge that makes the Iron Warriors the most effective siege specialists in the galaxy. Knowledge is their true weapon, accumulated over 10,000 years of systematic destruction and refined through countless iterations of tactical analysis. They do not fight for glory, or transcendence, or the favor of dark gods. They fight because fighting is what they do, and they do it better than anyone else in a universe that seems determined to provide them with endless opportunities to prove their expertise. But in the quiet moments between battles, when the guns fall silent, and the calculations are complete, and the reports have been filed, Korvek sometimes remembers what it felt like to build something. He remembers the satisfaction of watching walls rise under his direction, the pride of completing a project that would shelter and protect, rather than simply demonstrate the futility of resistance. He remembers believing that his skills served a purpose beyond the systematic elimination of hope from a galaxy that seemed to have precious little of it to begin with. Those memories are dangerous. They represent a weakness that the Iron Warriors cannot afford, a sentimentality that interferes with the mathematical purity of their purpose. Korvek has learned to suppress them through the same systematic discipline that he applies to siege warfare, identifying the emotional vectors, calculating their impact on operational efficiency, and implementing countermeasures that neutralize their effect on his decision-making process. Yet they persist, these memories of when destruction served creation rather than simply serving itself. They whisper to him in the darkness between battles, reminding him that there was a time when he believed that tearing down walls was justified by what would be built in their place. They suggest that perhaps the Iron Warriors' greatest victory would be to stop winning, to lay down their weapons, and return to the building that once gave their existence meaning beyond the mathematical reduction of resistance to zero. But such thoughts are luxuries that the Fourth Legion abandoned long ago, along with their loyalty to an Imperium that viewed them as expendable tools rather than honored sons. The Iron Warriors are what they chose to become when they learned that the universe rewards competence with contempt and faithful service with exile. They are the inevitable result of discovering that building things requires hope in the future, while destroying them requires only an understanding of physics and the will to apply that understanding without restraint. Korvek returns to his fortress on Medringard, where new siege reports await his analysis and new targets require his attention. The galaxy contains an infinite supply of walls that need to be brought down, defenses that need to be overcome, and hope that needs to be systematically eliminated through the application of superior tactical doctrine. It is honest work, in its way, perhaps the only honest work left in a universe where every other purpose has been revealed as self-deception or wishful thinking. He begins calculating trajectories for the next siege, finding satisfaction in the mathematical elegance of destruction and the cold comfort of competence exercised without illusion. The Iron Warriors endure because they understand what they are, and embrace it without reservation. They are the breakers of things, the enders of hope, the living proof that entropy always wins in the end. It is a terrible purpose, but it is their purpose, chosen with full knowledge of its cost, and embraced with the same systematic discipline that they apply to everything else. In the end, perhaps that is enough, to be exactly what you chose to become, to excel at your chosen craft, and to find meaning in the perfect execution of your purpose, however dark that purpose might be. The Iron Warriors have achieved a form of transcendence through their systematic perfection of destruction, becoming living equations that solve themselves through the application of violence and the mathematics of collapse. They are what they are, and what they are is very, very good at bringing things to an end. The siege guns thunder once more across the battlefields of eternity, and Korvek calculates the precise moment when another bastion of hope will learn the Iron Warriors' fundamental truth: everything built must eventually fall, and that they are the ones who ensure it falls according to plan.